These scammers on a global scale are making revenues anywhere between 500 billion to 1 trillion. It's huge. Some people even estimate that it's bigger than the drug trade now. And many of those involved and running these scam centers are actually people from China. Hey guys, welcome back to the Are We OK podcast, where we talk about public policies and politics in ways that are relevant to you, the person on the street. I am Dr. Bota or OKM, and
I'm Peter, Mr. Money.
Peter, before we start off on today's show, I just want to highlight something that is on my body.
Which part of the body?
Which part? That is important. That's so important. I want to show my socks.
These
are very
beautiful socks, huh?
Very nice pink socks that matches with my, with my batik top. And these are not sponsored. These are bought especially by my wife. This is a tip from Typical Us, and they do customize and also these kinds of branding for batik socks.
Right.
So I
that's
thought it's
cool.
quite nice. I just wanted to showcase it. And this is a Malaysian product that I wanted to highlight.
Oh.
You want me to get a pair for you? So that... Hey, actually, I've never seen you in batik before.
I don't have a batik. In fact, I've been thinking about buying batik for quite a long time, but haven't get my hands on it yet.
Wait, so if let's say there's any batik...
Yeah, if anyone who runs a batik company,
boutique,
boutique, you want to dress me up in batik to see how will I look like in it, welcome to come and talk to us.
Yeah, so, batik shirt, maybe batik,
batik socks.
So I want to get this episode started by asking you a question, Peter, and you have to answer honestly. Yeah? Have you ever been a victim of a scam?
Yes, I fell into a victim of a scam by a friend. So a friend of a friend who was a lawyer shared with me that he needed some money to make some payments for some legal proceeding kind of thing. But what happens is that the client do not have the money, so they have this system where they will front the money for the transaction. And then you get to collect a percentage. So when he was telling me, I didn't want to go into it. I don't know, no thank you, and stuff like that. After a couple of times of talking to me, he threw his last bomb. Actually, my mother is very sick. I really need to do this so that I can make my ends meet.
So this kind of emotional blackmail thing.
Yeah. So then after he said that, I was like, then just nice that month, I got my dividend. So then I was like, okay lah, I mean, I was from a hard position. Now he said until like that. Okay lor. Then I
So you fronted him the money? Yes, okay.
Yeah. And he was supposed to pay back, but he obviously went missing. And I think that I had fault in it. I should have done my due diligence by calling up the law firm directly. I should have done my due diligence by calling up all these relevant people that he talked about. Yeah, and then when he asked me to bank in the money that time, he also asked me to directly bank into the father's bank account.
Okay.
Yeah,
okay.
and I thought, okay lah, is to help the mother pay for bills,
family,
ma?
yes.
Yeah, so I can understand. And the father used to be a principal for a private school that's quite popular in Puchong.
Oh,
so I trusted all this, like their background and everything, right? And I have other friends who are lawyers who know him, but I just didn't cross my mind to call them to ask.
To check, yeah.
And when all that happened, when I called the friends, they say he's been doing the same thing to
them
all their friends.
All right. So where's this guy now? MIA.
Nowhere to be found. Yeah. Okay. I just do not know where he is. He definitely doesn't reply my call anymore. And apparently his name is also online now.
Thankfully, I've not been a victim of scams. But I have gotten some kind of those credit card fraud issues where I had to go and cancel my credit card. Thankfully, I appealed to the bank, and the bank returned the money to me. Wasn't that much. I think it happened last year when I bought a new computer, and somewhere along the line, I think when I used my computer to do a credit card transaction, somehow it wasn't protected. And I think my credit card information got leaked out. But anyways, the bank resolved everything, so that was okay. So the reason why I bring up this scam issue is of course something that's very, very, apparent and getting more and more apparent all over the place in Malaysia and also outside Malaysia. And I recently heard this 8-part podcast called Scam Incorporated or Scam Inc. That was produced by The Economist. Specifically, their Southeast Asian bureau chief, the journalist called Sue-Lin Wong, or Wong Sue-Lin, who is originally from Australia. She worked as an Economist correspondent in China for some period of time. And she did this excellent podcast series called The Prince that talked about the life of President Xi Jinping.
Yep.
Right, so that was very popular. Of course, because of that, she couldn't go back to China, and now she's covering the Southeast Asian beat. Right, and this podcast is excellent because it starts off in the middle of Kansas, in a small bank there, where the bank CEO got duped, had to put in like 30-40 million US dollars, to this scam, entity, rather person who was scamming him, and then it caused the collapse of the bank. And from there on, Sue-Lin went to other countries, including a scam factory on the border of Thailand and Myanmar. She went to Singapore to uncover some of where the money was going. She went to Europe and London specifically to talk to the people who are involved in some of these larger ecosystems. And then she went back to US, to Kansas, to wrap up the story. When I ask you about, let's say, scam issues, right? How prevalent do you think these are in the context of Malaysia?
Oh, extremely. Yeah, now that you say it about like even business getting scammed, right? I mean, just 2 years back, I heard from a friend of mine. I always thought that scam just like, okay lah, normal people, you get credit card scam, kan? But I had this friend who actually, one day he received an email from his vendor, and it says that they haven't paid the bill yet. And because they're so close to the vendor, they don't owe them money. He immediately pay according to the bank account number given. And what happened was that it was actually a scammer who hacked the account and then replicated everything to look extremely similar, just by one or two things different. And they just banged in the money. The money was gone. Yeah.
So corporates get it.
Corporates get it.
We think that sometimes maybe only old people or people who are not very IT savvy get scammed. I can share with you a story of a friend of mine, who is very educated, but suddenly, in the middle of the night, she got a call. I have a parcel delivery for you, and I'm from this particular parcel delivery company. And when we realized that this parcel couldn't be delivered to you, and then when we got it back into our center, we opened it, we found that there were drugs in the parcel, right? And this is a very serious offense. I'm going to pass the phone call to another person who will follow up with this issue, and then pass to another person, who then passed her to another person who pretended to be a police. And then the policeman said, okay, talking in Malay and also English to her, said that this is a very serious offense. We need to know where you're staying. We need to come and interview you, and to ask you what exactly happened and how come you were delivering these drugs were supposed to be delivered to you. And you cannot tell anyone about this because this is under Official Secrets Act.
Yep. And
they even WhatsApp her sort of like a PDF file that says you cannot tell anyone. If you do, you'll be charged under the Official Secrets Act. And because she's very good friends with me, and she was one of the people that I think she trusted, and she thought I knew government and would be able to help her. And then I went to her place. I saw the evidence on the phone and all that kind of stuff. And then I told her, "You've been scammed." Luckily, no money went out. Right? So this happens to everyone, and I think this the Scam Inc. podcast elevates it to a level whereby you can see the transnational character of these kinds of operations, right?
Yeah. I mean, to add on last part of it, right, is that, do you know that my name has been always used for scam? Yeah, you'll probably come across the article that me and Sadiq, they took a screenshot. I think this video could be the next screenshot. They'll say that we are talking about some secret investments, and you can make a lot of money. And guess what? They imitated the whole website to look like either FMT or even any official news site like The Star.
And to say that you're recommending this product.
That's right. They make it look exactly the same. It was so interesting that one day, my business partner, Frankie, his auntie called and asked him, hey, the product, the investment scheme, that Mr. Money has can reserve a seat for me. Then he was like, what is that? Then he said, they sent him the article. Then he said, no, there's a scam. Then you know what happened? The auntie was so angry. She said, you purposely don't give me the thing, is it?
Wow.
We're like, well, that's so convincing until we tell her that there's no such scheme.
She still don't believe.
She thought we are like,
depriving her of an investment opportunity.
Yes. So I can tell you, they are so well run.
Yeah. I mean, it's a huge industry. You've seen how, for example, some of the AI, created, text and also speech of people like Lee Hsien Loong advocating for a certain product, Lawrence Wong from Singapore advocating for a certain product, and it's so real that I think a lot of people can easily get fooled by it, lah. And just to sort of like put it out there, I think myself and Peter, we've engaged in these kinds of issues in different ways. Peter, identity has been used in wrongly in these kinds of scams. For me, as a former member of parliament, when I was an MP, I also dealt with many people who were either victims of scams or even people whose accounts were used as mule accounts.
Yep.
And later on, they themselves found they were prosecuted by the government for allowing their accounts to be used as mule accounts. These are very young people that somehow, somewhere along the way, got duped into allowing their accounts to be used. So we're willing to, I think, work with the National Scam Center and others to make sure that the word goes out, and then we are able to show many instances of how these scams work to educate the public in a smaller scale than what Sue-Lin has done for The Economist. But Peter, another reason why I wanted to bring up this issue at this point in time is that there is a geopolitical dimension to this story, which is the following. A lot of these scams are done out of certain countries in Southeast Asia, right?
Yeah.
You're talking about Myanmar because the internal border controls there are quite weak, and different areas within the country are controlled by different militia groups, for example. You're talking about Cambodia, some places that even maybe get protected by some of the local authorities. In this podcast, Sue-Lin pointed to a case in the Philippines in a small town called Banban in the town of Cebu that was run by a person, the mayor there called Alice Goh, purportedly. And it was like a huge scam business and industry there, right? And even in Malaysia, we've seen how, for example, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation actually highlighted a story and did a story on how there was a scam operation being run out of KL. Yep. Cheating Australian citizens, right? So this is sort of like one aspect that actually brings together different countries in Southeast Asia for different purposes. And we of course heard about how a Chinese actor was even kidnapped in Thailand recently and put in a scam center to work, and this resulted in significant drop in the number of tourists from China going to Thailand.
That's right.
So this is not just affecting the people who are caught in these scams. It also affects people who are kidnapped, including Malaysians, to work at these scam centers. And of course, this transnational or international dimension of this will, I think, inevitably, if it hasn't already, caught the attention of the authorities in the United States.
Yep.
Right? And why do you think I want to bring this up in relation to the US? Why do you think this is relevant?
I think especially right now it's even more relevant, where you have a very reactive president sitting in the US who is trying everything he can to come out with a message that we are going to protect our citizens, and everyone else seems to either be an enemy or alliance. So you don't want to be on the wrong side of the fence that easily being put as the enemy.
Yep.
Yeah.
So very good point. And this is why I wanted to really highlight this, because of the prominence that the Economist podcast has given to this issue, especially from a transnational perspective, where it is estimated that these scammers, on a global scale, are making revenues anywhere between 500 billion to 1 trillion. It's huge. Some people even estimate that it's bigger than the drug trade now, and because American citizens are being duped, because it has been, reported that many of those involved and running these scam centers are actually people who from China, Chinese citizens who have left the country because they have executed successfully some scam, initiatives or scam projects in China. They have to leave the country now, and they're using that knowledge, that know-how, to scam other people from all over the world using those kind of techniques.
Yeah. And usually they run to Southeast Asia to start a new base.
Correct.
That's one thing.
Yeah, and then the fact that Southeast Asia is involved also, and maybe this can be mixed up in the larger drug trade. These are all elements which will make the Trump administration pay attention to this issue, maybe sooner rather than later. And if we are not ahead of this issue, Malaysia and other Southeast Asian countries don't come together to really try to show the narrative that we are doing something about this, President Trump may just say, okay, all these are scam countries. We're going to hit you with tariffs and then see how you respond.
Yeah, this reminds me suddenly of the human trafficking list, right?
Yes.
Where we are not standing on a very good tier, right? Yeah,
Yep.
and what if they come up with another list for it, which is a scam list?
Correct.
I wonder what tier will we be in?
Well, okay, so this is another important point, right? I think Malaysia is not as bad as some of these other countries, especially for Myanmar, for example, in Southeast Asia, because we have a little bit, we have more autonomy in terms of how the police and other authorities are trying to control these things, but I think we cannot just rest on our laurels to think that if, let's say, Myanmar get whacked, then just let Myanmar go. Let Myanmar get whacked. We are the chair of ASEAN. We have to protect the interests of ASEAN countries, taking leadership in these issues. And some of these, in the context of Myanmar, are tied up with the peace prospects in Myanmar as well.
Yep.
Because, the central government may not have effective control, whether it's through the military or through the police, on some of these border towns, which is where a lot of these industrial scam factories are operated.
Yeah, that's true.
And I'm just wondering, have you watched this Netflix movie? And this was a huge movie in China, I was told, called No More Bets.
I haven't watched it yet because I just can't bear myself to even watch it.
But you've heard of it, right?
Yes. I've heard so much of it. I read about it. And every time I want to watch it, I just feel so sad that within the first half an hour, I just turn it off. And every time I can just inch past like 10 more minutes, I get so angry that I just turn it off.
And I think one of the things that makes it easier to be evil, so to speak, is because it's anonymous.
That's right.
Right? It's anonymous. You don't actually get to see the person you're scamming face to face.
That's right.
They are, probably a few thousand kilometers away in another country. And, this is... And the more money you have, the more addicted you are with the process.
And the hard part is, it is so lucrative for them because the risk is so much lower compared to drug trade or human trafficking. Yeah, even if you get caught, so what? It's just a scam. How long are you going to be in jail for? Right? Compared to drug, it's going to be so much more, right? So I think the whole thing needs kind of like a systematic reform kind of thing, a policy reform to be able to target it better. And the next thing that is also a little bit scary is how US really wants to beat China, right? Then this could be
something that they used to...
Something they used to clamp down even further.
Yep.
Right? And... yeah, that could affect all of us.
Sure. So continue to watch this space and then we'll take a short break and come back and talk about something else in the financial ecosystem, but not scams. And this has got to do with the removal of the Group Chief Financial Officer of Maybank. Be right back. Welcome back to the second segment of the Are We OK podcast. I am Dr. Bota and he is...
Mr. Money, Peter.
Peter, usually we don't talk about corporate news and, we don't usually dive down into corporate news in this, show. But something that happened in the corporate world recently captured my attention and also the attention of some of my friends who are in the finance and also larger corporate ecosystem. And this is pertaining to the removal of the Group Chief Financial Officer of Maybank, Puan Khalija Ismail. And this happened on the 17th of February, 2025. Happened quite suddenly. And, just a bit of background. She has been working for Maybank for over 30 years. She was promoted or appointed as Group CFO in 2021. And her contract was apparently renewed last year in 2024, whereby she will carry on in this role for another, I think, 2 to 3 years before she retires at the age of 60, right? So according to the Edge, she was removed from her position due to non-compliance with internal requirements and processes, according to several analysts who attended the briefing that was done by Maybank. The bank's management also insisted that there was no falsification of financial accounts and that all statements remains true and fair, right? So, the internal inquiry that Maybank conducted was not triggered by any law enforcement agency and remains an isolated incident. So, Bank Negara has been told and informed, and then now the acting CFO has been appointed. He, I think, was the former CFO of the Islamic Bank for Maybank. Right. So, just based on your own corporate understanding and also dealings, why do you think this case suddenly caught the attention of the people in the corporate and also the finance world?
Well, I think when you're talking about group CFO, it's extremely high level. And with the fact that the contract was renewed 2 years back, usually it's very well planned. You don't suddenly just remove someone, right? And as per my knowledge, generally most of the time when there is a removal, there usually is something very serious.
Like possible fraud, for example.
And they will try their best to ease people into it rather than a sudden removal because it's never a good sign.
Sure.
And usually the typical thing that follow right after is a volatility in share price.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, especially if let's say you can't control the narrative.
That's right. And so it's no wonder that the whole market is paying attention to this. I guess that statement itself that the Age published, right, which is highlighting that the bank management also insisted there was no falsification of financial account and all statements remain true and fair. That tells you something because usually that would be the reason. But now they are stressing to you that this is not the reason. Yeah. So
and that's an important point to make because, I was told that this is the period where a lot of the financial accounts of corporations are being closed, to prepare for their audited statements to be published. And for the group CFO to be removed at this time is also quite potentially destabilizing.
That's right.
Because that person will also have inputs in terms of the condition of the financial accounts of the bank.
Yeah.
Which is why I think Maybank was very quick to insist or to say that there was no falsification or nothing is wrong with the standing of the financial statements of the bank.
That's right. Yeah.
Right. So how do you think this would reflect on the senior management and also the board of Maybank?
I think this will lead to a question. Like, I bet right now there'll be a lot of chapters. People are probably wondering if it's not for accounts problem, then what? For what reason a person will be removed at this time of this importance? And I guess the last and final part also is that Maybank is one of the largest banks in Malaysia.
It's one of the largest banks in Southeast Asia.
And it's an important asset to it's of national interest. Let's put it this way. Yes. So it's no wonder that everyone is chattering.
Yeah, and Puan Khalija has said that she will seek legal action to protect her name and also her reputation. And I think one of the important reasons why I wanted to bring this up is because there are certain processes with regards to internal management of a company, especially one that's as important as Maybank, that should be followed in cases where senior management is removed, right? Including somebody like Puan Khalija. And we're not really quite sure whether her removal was approved by the Maybank board. We're not quite sure whether the CEO, the group CEO of Maybank was on board, in terms of executing this removal. We're not quite sure if, let's say, the leadership, the management of the board at Maybank thought about the potential repercussions of this kind of removal, especially if, let's say, they would have anticipated that Puan Khalija would obviously not take this sitting down and want to clear her name as what she's trying to do. This raises a lot more questions than it answers, right? And I think some of the investors are even asking questions, including the minority shareholder watchdog group, they want more clarity in terms of what happened and what transpired, and whether the processes that were maybe found to be wanting that allowed certain things to happen, have they been fixed? What was the cause of some of these issues that resulted in the firing of the GCFO? So I think this issue will continue to have leaks, and especially if, let's say, she does take this to court, there will be more things that will be discussed and also to be reported on by the reporters, and even some members of the board may be called to give testimony. Right. And I think this episode to me shows the importance of following due process, when it comes to these kinds of management decisions, and also due diligence in terms of making sure that the board is on board with any of these major decisions. And if they were not, then definitely, these kinds of questions have to be answered by the management team and those who made this decision within Maybank. And I think also it shows, it needs to be managed well from a transparency perspective, so that whatever happened at this particular issue, there can be safeguards to prevent these kinds of things from happening again at other banks and other large corporates that are important component of the stock market of the Malaysian corporate scene. Yeah, so I think we probably will have other things to report on this, but I just wanted to highlight this because I thought, we should just throw this out there. Right. And if you have any comments, any questions about this, please put it in the comment section.
Yeah, maybe before we wrap it up, right, on this particular topic, maybe Kevin, you can share with us, why do you think that this is a very important policy thing related as a whole? Why we specifically bring it up in RBOK in this case?
Okay, so I'll give you a comparison or parallel. There were certain board decisions that were made in the 1MDB scandal that allowed certain transactions and decisions to be made that caused the scandal to grow and grow. There were certain board members that did not agree with the approach that the then Prime Minister was taking, and they decided to resign from the board of 1MDB.
Right.
I'm not saying that this is a 1MDB scandal. Please don't get me wrong, right? I'm just saying that, in the context of the largest bank in Malaysia, when something like this happens that captures the public imagination that investors are looking at, we need to understand if, let's say, there are certain board procedures and processes, whether these kinds of processes and procedures were followed or not, right? And, this reflects on the larger corporate governance in Malaysia. We remember, for example, the financial scandals associated with Serba Dynamic and the kind of repercussions it had on the stock market. Even some people in the Securities Commission, resigning from the SC because they may not have agreed with some of the decisions that was made by the then Prime Minister Ismail Sabri. Right, so I think this issue may go up even higher to Minister of Finance, to that kind of ecosystem, especially when more information is known. That's why I wanted to sort of flag this up, because I've seen some of these things happen, and Maybank is a very well-run bank. It's provides good dividends to PNB. I'm not a shareholder, but I think it's an important part of the ecosystem for PNB shareholders, for example, right? And that's why I think we need to pay close attention to these kinds of things that are happening. Yeah. Okay. We'll take a short break and then we'll come back and talk about a Malaysian who is currently on death row in Singapore for drug trafficking. And we're going to talk about this and how perhaps this may relate to some of the things that may happen in Singapore in the run-up to its next general election that is speculated to take place in May this year. Be right back. Welcome back to segment 3 of the Are We OK podcast, where we talk about politics and public policies in ways that are relevant to you, our listener. Peter, for this third part, I'd like to bring up an issue that is relevant for Malaysia and also for Singapore. And this is, let me put on my glasses, getting old already, Lofa. This is regards to the death penalty for Pannir Selvam in Singapore rather. And, for context, this person, Pannir Selvam, was supposed to have been actually executed this week for drug trafficking, trafficking 51.84 grams of diamorphine at the Woodlands checkpoint on September 3rd, 2014. So this is about 10 years since that case happened.
Yep.
But he was granted an 11th hour stay of execution by the Singapore's Court of Appeal today. And of course, his Malaysian lawyer is actually N. Surendran, who used to be the MP for Padang Serai in Kedah, and a very prominent human rights advocate. So the reason why I wanted to talk about this case is that it's not something that's new. There have been other Malaysians who have been on death row in Singapore before for drug trafficking. And some of the cases are actually quite sad. I remember a case just before this whereby a Malaysian man who was judged to have an IQ that is rather low, and maybe couldn't really evaluate all the things that he was doing, was also given a package to deliver to Singapore. And then he didn't know what was inside. Later on, found out there were drugs and he was executed. So, of course, there's a lot of protests on the side of Malaysia for these cases, asking the Prime Minister to intervene, asking for international organizations to intervene. And Singapore's response is usually, this is our own sovereign right. We have these laws. Everyone knows what these laws are, whether you're Malaysian or non-Malaysian. And even when we fly to Singapore, for example, before we land, it's always something that they say, right? We have very harsh punishment for drug trafficking, which includes the death sentence. And the narrative that Singapore has always given is that this is a way to make sure that Singapore is protected from all these things that are happening. The reason why I wanted to bring this up now is because there's going to be likely an elections in Singapore. Not likely, definitely elections in Singapore this year. Their 5-year term runs out soon, and people have speculated that it could be held as close as May 2025. So, the focus of Singapore's elections would likely be on bread and butter issues. Cost of living increases, maybe some immigration issues because of a lot of people that have come into Singapore during COVID, including non-citizens, and there's going to be talk about whether or not these people have taken away jobs from Singaporeans and things like that. But maybe on the sidelines, there may be some discussions on issues such as the death penalty in Singapore. And I'm not sure whether you keep track of this, but I just wanted to have this discussion with you. For the younger generation in Singapore, right, this is an issue where there have been people in NGO groups and even the opposition who have campaigned on this issue to say that we should be more lenient about the death penalty and have used this as a possible elections campaign issue. Are you aware that this is some of the undercurrents that are happening in Singapore?
Not too aware.
Okay. So the reason why this is important in the Singapore context, right, is that I think many of the issues that will be discussed and debated in the Singapore political ecosystem, right, will have this kind of generational divide component or element to it, right? One other example would be the issue of LGBT, right? So that's an issue that is also, being discussed in Singapore. There's a clear generational divide. The older people are obviously not in favor. The younger people are more open about it.
Yeah.
And the way the Singapore government came to sort of like a compromise, I think last year, was that they repealed a particular section in the penal code that basically made sodomy punishable by imprisonment, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, they also put an amendment into the constitution that basically says that a marriage is between a man and a woman, right? To appease the people who are maybe more social conservatives, some people in the Christian community and some of the older folks.
Yeah. So now you can have the relationship, you just can't get married.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. Yeah. So, I think
Very smart, very smart.
very practical. That's the Singapore
Practical,
government way.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think on the LGBT kind of landscape, probably you can call it a draw lah. Both sides have a bit of what they wanted. Whether this issue will crop up again, as an elections issue, I don't think so. But this issue on the death penalty could be one that could be highlighted, and I think the more it affects people in Singapore, for example, the more it affects, let's say, Malaysians who are caught like Pannir. I think it will have a little bit of traction. I think this is also a reflection on the kind of challenges that Prime Minister Lawrence Wong faces. There are a few hardliners, I would call them, in the Singapore cabinet, in the Singapore government leadership, that still uses the death penalty as a way to say that I'm firm in advocating for traditional values in Singapore. These will be people who are closer to the Lee Kuan Yew way of thinking and doing. And the Home Minister of Singapore, Shanmugam, is probably the exemplar of this, because he himself has issued some statements, some social media postings to argue that Singapore needs to defend itself, and it needs to defend itself on the position of, let's say, the death penalty. We don't want any of the Western liberals to come and influence us, right? But there's also another kind of political trend that the younger people are saying that this is actually too draconian, that it is not progressive, that it punishes those that are more vulnerable in society, because these are the people that are most likely to get caught, to get duped, including people like Pannir from Malaysia. And thoughts on this?
I think for me, I'm a bit more on the draconian side, I suppose, when it comes to this particular part. Not that I like death penalty. I think it's very, very sad.
Okay.
Yeah, I really think it's very sad, especially, like, for example, people get duped. And however, I do think that there needs to be a more robust system to deal with these kind of separate issues. That's for one. I mean, just look at it this way. One of the things that in every single country, or even just a small corporation like ours, right, protecting a culture sometimes requires certain activities that people feel is not that necessary or not so important. But some of these are things that make it. For example, Joseph Schooling.
Okay.
Fantastic. Wonderful swimmer. National pride. Smoke weed in another country.
Come back.
Mati. Straight away mati. I don't care whether it's smoke in overseas. They could have just kept quiet, right? And this has more national pride in it than anything else. A country that is not even afraid to penalize my top guy, who is the national pride, is the way that they are telling everyone, I don't care who you are, don't play drug. Now, then you can say, but what if people get duped into it? If once you put an official stand and say, all right, if for people who are duped into it, then we will excuse the death penalty for them. I mean, there could be certain ways of dealing with it, but then the truth is there are many criminal masterminds who will use this as a loophole. And generally that's how loopholes are created, right? And to put it this way, a lot of laws are being in place to prevent extreme measures, right? Now, and in this case here, then maybe we can just blanket ban death penalty, abolish death penalty as a whole. We can do that, but now it relates to a bigger issue.
Which is?
Okay. Number one, what is the most severe punishment from here? Let's say if it's
life imprisonment?
Life imprisonment,
okay.
Right? Then taxpayers' money it's not cheap to...
Yeah, sure. Keep somebody in prison for
keep everybody
forever.
in prison, right? Yeah, that's one thing. And we all know this one thing as well. At the end of it, the person come out also quite difficult.
To integrate the person back into
Sometimes
society.
quite difficult. But I think Singapore does have quite a good integration program.
I think they
Yellow
try
Ribbon.
They try to, yes.
Yeah,
through
yeah.
Yellow Ribbon, yes.
Yeah. And now I'm not saying that we shouldn't integrate, but my question is that I feel like it's a good debate point, but it still requires more thoughtful things to implement an exact action.
Sure.
Right? So then here's the question about it, where what are the pros and cons? So I can understand that why they are taking a hard stand. So I wouldn't say that I'm not open, right? But I wouldn't also say that I'm going to jump in and 100% support.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to take note here that one of the things that this government in Malaysia has done is to actually take away the mandatory death penalty for some punishments. And I think this was applauded by many in Malaysia and outside Malaysia. Basically saying that if, let's say, you are caught for drug trafficking offences, for example, and there are extenuating circumstances, the judge can have the authority not to put the death penalty. That means it's not mandatory.
Yeah, that's great, right?
Yeah. So I think that would be sort of like a step to take to be more humanitarian in these kinds of cases. And I think this was quite widely accepted in Malaysia by all sides. I'm not sure whether this is something that will happen in Singapore, but we do know of many cases of Malaysians who have been caught in that trap. And having that kind of flexibility, I think in Singapore would allow, I think, judges to look at cases like Pannir and look at them with more consideration.
That's
and also, some flexibility without hopefully compromising the larger message that you're sending that, don't play with drugs in Singapore, lah.
Yeah.
Right? We'll go after you, right?
Yeah.
But more than this, I think it'll be interesting to see this in the context or the framework or the rubric of the different kinds of generational contests that will take place in society in Singapore.
Oh, yes.
And also
that'll be interesting.
A reflection of these kinds of generational challenges within the politics or the politicians in Singapore. And of course, the most important being in the PAP, the ruling government, one of the longest ruling governments in the world. And to see whether there are any generational divides that will surface in some ways, and also to see whether or not these generational divides will be reflected in the way different opposition parties and also politicians would want to respond to this issue. And it may not just be this issue alone. There may be other generational issues that will come up to define the kind of political narrative in Singapore. Malaysia may also find ourselves discussing some of these issues in terms of sustainability of the civil service pension scheme that is now being changed into an EPF scheme. That is also a generational issue, and that there may be more that are in the works. Things like our policies in terms of how to approach the gig economy. That is also a generation issue. Older people probably not so much involved in the gig economy compared to many people in the younger generation. So I think we should continue to watch this space, not just for Singapore, but also in Malaysia, to see how these kinds of things, interplay with one another. Any final thoughts on this?
No. But I thought the suggestion of removing mandatory, I think that will be a perfect balance.
Sure. Malaysia has done this already.
Yeah.
And we'll continue to watch
But
this
I think
space.
to add on to the last part, I think we should do a series covering Singapore politics leading up to the election. That will be quite fun.
It will be interesting, but I'm not sure whether we can do this in Singapore or not because there are very strong media controls there.
No matter, we can do it here.
We can do it here. We can do a Zoom call with some people I know in the Singapore ecosystem and even some of the media people in the ecosystem in Singapore, just to show that we're interested in what's happening in Singapore. And this general election in Singapore will be quite consequential because it will be the first one that will be led by Prime Minister Lawrence Wong. And I'm sure that the opposition parties as well as the PAP are trying to gear themselves up to find new candidates to showcase to the Singapore electorate. This is the direction that each party is, moving towards. Yeah. So we'll come back with the last segment that also talks about Singapore, but this is more on the economic side of things, which is the Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone. What's next? Welcome back to the final segment of this podcast on the Are We OK podcast with me, Dr. Botak, and
Mr. Money.
Peter. I'm not sure whether you've been keeping track of this Johor-Singapore Special Economic Zone lately. Of course, there was the signing of the agreement in early January between the two ministers in Malaysia and Singapore, and witnessed by the two prime ministers. But have you sort of like seen any developments since the signing of that agreement?
There are some unofficial, there are some events there going on. I noticed that there are more and more happenings down there on the more consumer level. Like, for example, the other day there was this very big fight event and TMJ attended that.
Okay. What kind of fight? Was it like a boxing?
Kickboxing, super cool. Yeah, it was a big rah-rah there, like a stadium. For a moment, I thought it was overseas. Yeah, and apparently it's quite a big event.
Do you think it's likely for more of such events, maybe MMA, fights to be there?
I think it's very likely, and it's gonna be like international Johor something kind of thing. So I start to notice these two words is starting to appear a lot in many of the events there. International Johor something.
Okay. I'll come back to the international Johor part, but what I also read in the papers, I think last week, was the announcement of a big development project by Sunway near the RTS station in Johor. And of course, the property sector now in Johor is very hot because of all the investments that are coming in, because of interest from the side from Singapore wanting to buy property in Malaysia, with the idea that travel between Johor and Singapore will become much easier once the RTS, the rail network between Johor Bahru and Singapore comes into play, I think in early 2027, right? So you talk about international and Johor. I just wanted to highlight a recent announcement at Johor in Forest City, which is the launch of the Invest Malaysia Facilitation Centre Johor in Forest City. And this was done on the 18th of February, where the MB of Johor was there. Tengku Zafrul, the MITI minister, and also the Midas CEO was there. The IRDA, this is the Iskandar Regional Development Authority CEO, was there as well. He was the former mayor of Johor Bahru, this city council. And all this was witnessed by none other than TMJ. Right, so this is the second sort of like Invest Malaysia Facilitation Centre in Johor. The first one was established in Skudai, if I'm not mistaken. The first one was established in Kulai, if I'm not mistaken. And I think the relevance or the importance of this particular event is the fact that I think Malaysia wants to continue the momentum for JSSEZ in terms of projects. I also read recently that UOB signed some sort of agreement to do more facilitation of these kinds of investment and also business deals in the JSSEZ. And I'm sure that there will be more entities that will want to get involved. But here I want to highlight something which is, other than all these sort of like corporate moves and things of that nature, what do you think would really move the needle in terms of creating the narrative that Singapore is as invested in this JSSEZ as Malaysia, as Johor? Because right now, some people may say, it seems that more of the action is actually being initiated by the Johor and the Malaysian side rather than the Singapore side. What do you think can be?
Oh, I'm not really sure, man. I think if, let's say, on the Singapore end, I think there needs to be some sort of a more structural kind of policies that come out, like, for example, incentivizing their businesses to move over.
Yep.
That could be one. Number two, Singapore being Singapore, right? I think one of the issues that they have always been trying to solve is actually housing issues. And they've been throwing quite a lot of money to solve that problem.
Sure.
Why not throw a little bit to subsidize your people to come over here, right? That could be part and parcel of it. I guess the point I want to make is that while it seems like there's a lot of hoo-ha here on our side here, on Singapore side, looks like it's rather quiet. It looks like it's still the standard option. It is not the wow.
Not a game changer.
Yeah, not a game changer. It's a standard option. It's just like BAU.
Yeah,
let's just go there more.
Good to have. Okay lah. We'll do a bit more, but let's wait and see.
Yeah, that's right. I don't know whether is it because the RTS is not up yet.
Sure.
I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I think that any sort of like incentives or these kinds of big announcements that maybe will excite and spur on greater investments in the JSSEZ will probably not be coming from Singapore side anytime soon, because of the aforementioned elections that they're having, are going to have in May. Because you don't want to take away the spotlight from Singapore. And in fact, Lawrence Wong just had his budget announcement, I think last week, or earlier this week rather. And then, there were a lot of goodies that were being offered to Singaporeans, including more community development vouchers that people can use. I think it's between 6 to 800 ringgit, 6 to 800 Sing dollars that they can use to spend on different activities in Singapore. And also, topping up of different accounts such as the MediSave accounts and other accounts that Singaporeans can use for their health, for their skills development and things of that nature. So, it's obviously gearing up for the elections. But the reason why I want to bring this up is because to really instill that kind of confidence that the JSSEZ is something that both sides are investing in, you actually need to have a few iconic projects that can capture the imagination of investors in both countries. And this falls into the narrative of what Rafizi Ramli has said, and this has been included in the agreement, where it is projected that there will be 50 projects that will be part of the JSSEZ within the next 5 years. That will qualify for incentives and also support from both governments. And these projects have not really been identified yet. We don't know the conditions. We don't know the criteria.
We only know that there's 50.
We only know that there's 50. But, based on my experience in MITI, in MIDA, I think I can say that these kinds of projects will need to have certain criteria or parameters before they can be considered to be put in this list of 50. Right? Of course, investors from Singapore, can go and invest in Johor without necessarily needing the incentives that are part and parcel of the 50. But what Singapore and Malaysia needs to do is to probably look for projects and even try to encourage and catalyze certain projects so that they can be put in as part of the 50 to increase interest and investment in the JSSEZ.
Yeah, I think that would be a great idea, right?
Yeah. So Rafizi has said, look, we'll wait and see. We'll evaluate the projects on a case-by-case basis, right? But right now, I don't really see enough coordination and on the Malaysian government side, and enough direction from even Rafizi's own office to say that, hey, we are looking for projects in these particular areas, and these ministers and their agencies will be the ones that I will work with as the coordinating minister, in charge of the JSSEZ on the Malaysian side, to try to catalyze these projects, right? So what criteria, in my mind, do these projects need to have? I'll give you a few. The first criteria is that it must include entities from Singapore and Malaysia, right? It cannot be like, Singapore company come and build a factory in Johor, and that's it, right? Because there's no involvement of Malaysian companies in the ecosystem.
Yep.
Right? It cannot be, a Malaysian company is doing some construction for a Singapore property company. Right? That doesn't fit the bill as well. So it needs to have genuine partnerships that add value, that involve Malaysian and Singapore entities.
That's right. Yeah. Right. Some sort of a skill transfer, some sort of shared resources.
Something more substantive.
That's right.
So that's one element. Second thing is the kind of catalytic value that these projects can have must be significant enough for government entities on both sides to get involved to support. Right? So it can be, the EDB in Singapore. It can be Enterprise Singapore on the side of Singapore. It can be even the Tourism Development Board in Singapore, if let's say there are joint projects that they can do on a tourism basis with Malaysia. And then on Malaysia side, it can be MIDA, it can be Matrade, it can be the EPU, it can be the Ministry of Economy. So, but the value proposition in terms of the value added needs to be high enough, right? So that's the second one. And then I think the third criteria would be, if let's say there are other kind of spillover effects that can benefit both sides, whether it is in the form of, let's say, skills development, whether it is in the form of increasing the value of commerce between the two countries, whether it's e-commerce, whether it's the transportation of physical goods, whether it's the production of physical goods that will require logistics support from both sides, right? So I think these criteria probably can be the basis to look at some projects. And here I want to speculate, put out some examples of projects that can benefit both sides. And I'll give you a few examples. One example would be, I bring Sunway in because they are, a company that is very much involved in the property side in Johor, but also has the trust of some investors in Singapore. For example, the healthcare arm of Sunway, GIC, the Government Investment Corporation of Singapore, actually has invested into their ecosystem. So for Sunway, I can think of a few projects whereby they can work together with, let's say, Enterprise Singapore to build some sort of startup and also entrepreneurship ecosystem in Medini Iskandar.
Yep.
Because Medini Iskandar, it's a up and coming place, not just a property play, but I think a place where you can potentially attract younger people to go and start businesses there, to do pilot projects, to roll out some of their applications, whether it's software or hardware. And it has the potential to have this kind of happening vibes in that ecosystem.
Yep.
So Sunway can provide that kind of physical infrastructure. Enterprise Singapore, which is an entity that tries to bring Singapore companies outside Singapore to match with businesses in other countries and also economic opportunities in other countries, can bring in some of their startups into that ecosystem. And work together with some of the entities that are already in Johor. For example, Sunway actually has seeded a venture called 42 School. That is a coding school.
Yep. 42 KL.
Yeah, 42 KL. And I think they've also expanded into the JB ecosystem. And that can be part and parcel of one particular project. Because I'm not sure whether you are aware, the startup ecosystem in Johor Bahru, especially in the tech and the more advanced space, is actually non-existent.
Yeah, because any more advanced, they either go to KL or either go to Singapore directly.
Right. Exactly. Right, so that would be a good place to try out some of these things.
But I think that one is something that Sunway is quite familiar with because they actually have the future lab in Sunway itself, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, and they can replicate the same thing in Johor, and I think that will be highly beneficial for the people there.
Yep. So for Sunway iLabs, they've obviously gotten a lot of experience in Subang, where they've started this iLabs ecosystem, and I think they're trying to replicate that through 42 School that is being done by the same group of people, and that's something that I think can enhance the services ecosystem in Iskandar in the JSSEZ. So that's just one example. I think there can be other examples. I talked about tourism just now, right? And this is an important industry to both countries. Why not consider having some sort of a joint concert promotion or tourism promotion product, right? It can be trying to attract a big act where they can have like 3 concerts in Singapore,
that'll be tricky, though.
2 concerts in Johor. No, it will be tricky, but
it'll be a good one.
It will be a good one, yes. Or even some of the things that you talk about, an MMA fight, one in Singapore, one in Johor, right? To cater to different audiences.
I mean, one championship is there.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
yes.
big.
Yep. So, some sort of tourism product and even something that's a bit more long-term. For example, having some sort of a triathlon series or some sort of a ultra-marathon series.
That's right. Or even cycling.
Or even cycling, yes. Our friend Jason Leong would make fun of it, but I think it's a good thing to have. I know that there are many cyclists in Singapore,
yes,
including semi-professional cyclists that, of course, they cannot cycle that much in Singapore, limited space. They will take the causeway and go and cycle for a few hours in Johor and then go back.
Triathlon as well is quite big there, if I'm not wrong.
Right. So this is something that can involve both private entities in Singapore, the race organizers, even some companies that want to be venue sponsors, and also the tourism boards of and also the tourism promotion divisions of both governments. Right. So that is something that I think should be put on the table as an interesting project. And then maybe the last one would include things in the infrastructure realm. For example, trying to deploy renewable energy sources that can be invested by Singapore and Malaysian entities in Johor, and part of that renewable energy can be sold back to Singapore. Which is already being done on a small scale through an energy exchange called Energem. And I think this is part and parcel of the larger conversation that Singapore wants to have. Part of the infrastructure conversation can also include co-investments in things like water processing. Right. So, for example, if you get somebody like Sembawang Corp or Semcorp or Keppel to invest in technology that can process industrial water. That means you don't have to process water until it becomes potable water for you to drink. You can just process it enough for it to be industrial water, and this can be used to supply the manufacturing sector. It can be used to supply the data center ecosystem that's growing rapidly in Malaysia, in Johor particularly. And Singapore, with this kind of investment, can also help bring new technologies in. Some of their service sector companies can also come in to do JVs with Malaysian companies in the area of energy saving, energy efficiency, in the area of water saving, water efficiency. And that can build up the infrastructure ecosystem in renewable energy, in water, and I think that would be something that both governments can put resources and energy into. And some of this can find its way to being named as one of the top 50 projects.
Yeah.
Right?
Actually, I think one more area that they can actually do together is in the area of food security, because it's a common problem for both our country and we have the land.
Yes.
Yeah, and I feel that like either way, whether we like it or not, we are joining up the hip for this particular subject already.
Correct.
Yeah, so a lot of their food also came from us anyway. So might as well just co-invest into something that can create food security for both nations.
And Singapore has actually invested a lot in their 30 for 30 initiative, whereby they say by 2030 they want to be able to produce sufficient food to supply for 30% of their food needs. I think they've invested a lot in the tech part, in things like aquaculture and agri-tech. But I think the 30% mark may be not so easy to achieve. But the kind of technologies that they've developed probably can be applied at a larger scale if they find good JV partners in Singapore.
Yeah.
Right? Either in the private sector, or somebody gave me this suggestion. Some of the universities in Malaysia, they actually have access to large land banks in Johor. Whether it's UTHM near Batu Pahat, UTM in Skudai. I'm not quite sure whether they have access to that much land, but they are a good technology partner to partner with. And these are the kind of things that we need to curate and put in more effort in order to catalyze discussions, investment discussions on both sides of the border. But I think the real discussion can probably only take place after the Singapore elections. Any other ideas that you have in terms of trying to catalyze this JSSEZ ecosystem?
I think for now, the issue is still ideas are plenty. Execution is the thing. Yeah.
So we'll continue to watch this space. I'll be traveling more to Johor as well, because I'm a member of Cerebrum, a think tank that was formed by JCorp. And also, some of the corporates that I engage with are also interested to invest and to grow the JSSEZ ecosystem. Before we end today's episode, I'd just like to highlight two things. The first thing I want to talk about is the happenings that are happening in the DAP in the run-up to the party's elections, the CEC elections, the Central Executive Committee elections on the 16th of March, next month. I'm not contesting, I've said this before, but some people may be thinking that I will comment on some of the happenings that have already happened and probably will happen in the lead up to this election.
In fact, I thought you would have made some comments today, but I was
I just want to make it clear, I will not comment on the CEC elections before the elections itself, because I do not want my comments to be used by whichever side to say that, I'm supporting one side over the other, and this is an example of how I'm still trying to campaign for one side over another, right? So, but I will make a deep analysis of what the results, how the results can be interpreted after the 16th of March, and be sure to tune in when that happens. So that's the first thing I want to say. The second thing I want to say is, and I'll be saying more of this in future episodes, we will have our first live Are We Okay recording, right? And this is going to happen at none other than Taylor's University on the 22nd of March next month, where we will be talking about the future of work and the kind of skills that are needed for current students in order for them to thrive in the workplace, in the future workplace.
That's right.
And we will be inviting you guys to come and also to ask us any questions that you have. And that time it will be after the EP60 election, so you can even ask me about that as well. So myself and Peter will be there, and we'll give more, details in future shows as we approach the 22nd of March. Are you looking forward to that?
I'm definitely looking forward. I mean, we already had a conversation about this. I guess what I'm really looking forward is after the CEC as well, where we can tune up the conversation even more and have more exciting conversations by then. Although right now we are refraining from making any comments. Yeah.
We saved the best for last.
Yes. So for those of you guys who want to look behind the curtain even further, do remember to subscribe and turn on the notification so that after the CC elections, we'll have more that we can bring to you.
So thanks for all your support, and then we'll see you next week.
See ya.